G and I were talking about that this is put on by Dorman Products, and if you've ever participated in these lunch and learns, you know we do not sell products. Okay? Now, most certainly I'll mention their products once in a while, okay? Because after all, they are the ones that are sponsoring this, and you know it's not costing you guys anything, and they've been very, very kind. And as a trainer, I do need to get a lot of information from them, because it can get awful pricey for me to come up with components and stuff all day long. So once in a while they'll send me some components, and a lot of times I'll need them for my emissions and stuff like that. So I told you, you know what, I might pick a component of theirs and we'll call it a component of the month, or whatever case may be. So what I did was, this is a perfect example. I have a, you can hone in on this, I have a coolant sensor. I know we're in the suspensions, this will only take 2 seconds, but I wanted to point this out as a product. So they're into so many different things, and basically you guys that work on this stuff, you know that vehicle is going to come in, gee, my red light is on, and all of a sudden I can't start, or it quits and everything else. The strategy is in there to protect what? Protect the engine. So one of the crucial components to an engine, of course, is what? Coolant and oil. So pressure and coolant, temperature is so important. So you can purchase these things, and they try to upgrade them. I'm gonna, real fast, so I'm just not holding it, I decided I'm gonna turn on my meter here, if you can do that. You know, and it's just a little 2-minute thing here. Let me turn my camera on my meter. Okay, I try to be very, very fancy. Okay, let me invert it here. Oops, went a little too far. One more time, there it is. So you might not see it, but I'm gonna try to move this little thing here, all right? So it's basically a no-go. So if I'm on top, you can see over here, let me get this a little bit closer. You can see my float is there, okay? And if you're looking at meter, over 6,000, I'm not gonna split hairs. But when it comes down, and I gotta find just the right spot here, 0.752, okay? We're under 1,000 ohms. So that's basically all we're doing, okay? So it's a no-go. So I'll leave that alone. I just wanted to let you guys know that their products are all over the place. Let me get back in the camera here, and we're gonna get rock and rolling here. Before I go to one more thing, you know, Robert, how are you, sir? Pinpoint over there, because I don't want to forget. You guys are coming from all over the country, but one of the premier events that happens every year is this TST. This year it's called the Big Event 2025. It's on March 29th, okay? It's basically a lot of automotive type of stuff. And I mean, that place packs up with 500-600 for a whole days of training. It is huge. I mean, it is really, really huge, okay? I go there because, you know, for years I have done automotive trainings, but it's primary for the automotive group. But there's a lot of heavy duty guys come there because some of everything crosses over electrical and so on and so on. But I wanted to throw that out because one of our little group of Dorman trainers, there's only a few of us, you know, I'm the only one from heavy duty. There's G, of course, that runs it, you know, and G runs it. Back up to me, you know, G runs it, and we got Ken Sander, Pete Meyer, and Josh Weaver. He's gonna be doing one of the trainings. So anyway, if you can, please go over there. You have the time of your life. Actually, I go every year. I help kind of do the dirty, roll up the sleeve type of stuff with G, get everything set up. So participate in that. So let's get into this suspension thing here. Slowly warming up. We don't care about me. I just stand here. So, you know, what we're going to try to cover is commercial motor vehicle suspension overview, leaf spring systems, air springs, a few case studies and stuff. And I hope you walk away with seeing this portion of it a little bit, looking at it a little bit differently. It's not just a case of, oh my gosh, I got springs in here, and it's, there's a lot to these. So, but for you to work on some of these systems, you should have a clear understanding what's underneath your seat. So let's get going. I'm going to knock myself out of the way here. Okay. By the way, this is a new recyclable spring developed by a new suspension manufacturer. They're looking for distributors, so I had to throw that out. So if you guys are interested, give me a shout. And besides that, if you look at the picture closely, chances are pretty good that it would meet farm and farm cover vehicle exemptions, and keeps you out of trouble on the roadside when you get pulled over. Not to mention, those of you who work on springs, you know how hard it is to replace springs. Take a good look at this picture. That installation is so stupidly simple. I mean, you don't really require any minimum tools. I mean, just get yourself a jack and put that piece in there and strap it up real good, and you're good to go. I mean, actually, I'm seriously considering become a dealer on that. I'll have to talk to Dayton on that. They might consider it too. Suspensions, simple descriptions. What are you trying to do? Support the frame. They act as an intermediary between the axle and the frame. We expect a lot of the suspension, don't we? The suspension is expected to support the heaviest load the vehicle is designed for. Okay? However, we need to do a balancing act, because this could lead to a very harsh ride when empty. So a good suspension needs to perform well, whether loaded or unloaded. It truly is a balancing act, And we've come a long way. So the primary purpose, support the vehicle weight. And that is, again, back to balancing act, with and without a load. Suspension system also stabilizes the vehicle when traveling over various terrains encountered when traveling. It's also used to maintain proper axle spacing. I'm not quite sure. I'm not going to probably get into alignment right now, okay, because that thrust angles and stuff are very, very important. But I'm going to do probably a series in steering, and that's maybe where I'll couple it. But the suspension system must also be capable of absorbing the chassis from road shock. Okay? And again, let's face it, you guys can maintain the best springs in the world, but if you got a fleet or somebody that doesn't maintain the correct load range, doesn't really matter, does it? Because excessive loads can, however, if you exceed the load capacity of the vehicle and everything works together, you will have problems. Most common suspension systems used on today's trucks: spring, equalizing, beam, airbag, and I'll try to cover as many as I can, but within 45 minutes an hour, it's going to be hard to do. Springs, we can subcategorize them into a constant rate, progressive or vary rate, and auxiliary, and we can go beyond that, but I'm going to keep it just with the stuff that we normally would see out there. Okay, so the leaf. Sorry, I'm buttoning out you here. Leaf spring suspensions, these range from a single leaf, when I call them a steel plate, go for it, to a stack of leaves, steel plates. And again, I already mentioned they date back to the days of horse and buggy, so they're really nothing new. What's changed is the type of metals they use and everything. And just if you wanted to know, the only reason I threw that out there, they're manufactured from spring steel. It's an alloy steel that has been tempered, ideal for fabricating knives. And I guess maybe that's why I threw that in there. I mean, a lot of blacksmiths or people that want to be blacksmiths or try to do knives and so on, man, they love going out in the junkyards and getting that kind of steel. So, however, the spring steel allows for flexing without permanently deforming. Talk about deforming. As a load is applied to a spring pack, it's going to deflect. So by clamping the leaves together, movement due to deflection can cause an effect. It's a cause and effect has to overcome friction between the cause effect. This provides a self-dampening characteristic of the spring. So believe it or not, you have the deflection. Friction definitely comes into play, and you almost got to see when that spring kind of like deflects, the leaves have to rub against each other. So all that helps out. But why is dampening important? Because we try to limit oscillations after the spring compresses. I did throw in right here, guys, and I might say it quite a few times, that center bolt that clamps that leaf is so crucial in maintaining that self-dampening ability. I mean, that bolt, we sometimes take it for granted. If you guys have ever had to add leaves or take stuff together, you better get that bolt tight over there, Anyway, a broken center bolt can create a number of a cause and effect type of issues. I guess maybe I'm getting confused with the cause effect. Just kidding. Now, a good analogy of dampening suspension is a shock absorber used to dampen the suspension oscillations. And all you got to do is, I know I do, if I ever see a car and behind it, and all of a sudden you see the wheel bouncing, chances are pretty good you're gonna see the effect of a bad shock or shocks, okay? But just so you know, these multi-leaf springs, they can be just as effective as shock absorber in dampening suspension oscillations, but we still have the shocks. We'll get into shocks a little bit, they play a very crucial role. So now, let's jump into the real world here, okay? In the real world, okay, you guys perform inspections, you perform PMs, a vehicle comes in like this, and if this came into your shop, okay, would you pass it as meeting inspection requirements? I don't know about you guys. Absolutely, I would not. I mean, those springs, look how close they are to the caliper bolts. And the only reason they're that close is they are sagging, okay? They don't have it in them anymore. Again, this is why we have to have a good PM and inspection program. I would never put my name on that. And you can look it up into all your regulations and requirements and all that stuff. And I'll be very honest with you. Even if you think you don't see it, my name would never go on it. Now, we're going to break them down just a little bit, okay? This is a constant rate spring, and they have a constant rate of deflection. So here's just an example, not sure that you're going to remember this or anything. If 500 pounds deflects the spring assembly 1 inch, 1,000 pounds would deflect the same spring 2 inches. So a constant rate spring is mounted to the axle with the front of the spring mounted on the stationary bracket, and the rear end of the spring is mounted to a spring shackle. Shackle allows for a variation in spring length during compression and rebound. But I also put in there, does anything stick out in this picture? Because I'm a nut for kind of like, hey guys, how aware are you of your physical surroundings? How good are your eyes trained? Okay, so does anybody see anything? If anybody sees anything real fast, because I got to move on. If you want to type in, I'll give you a couple of seconds to type it in. Dead air. I don't like it. Right here, by the shackle. See they're touching over there? Okay. Those bushings and those pins are so warm, there should always be a little bit of a space. So if you do inspections, okay, that's the first thing your eye should catch. So if you know that they shouldn't be touching or they shouldn't be that close, the next step is I would put a jack in between the spring and the frame, and I will look for it. And if you're a company that does inspections, it don't go out the door. Okay? And these are some of those areas where the driver's gonna say, man, I hear this clunking and everything else. So this one here, what are you thinking about when you see these parts? Easy replacing? Easy just replacing the bushings? Lots of parts are involved in a spring suspension. My point with this slide is, okay, whenever I get new people getting into working with springs, I cannot emphasize enough that when you see these bushings and stuff, we all have to replace them once in a while. Nobody likes to do spring jobs, okay? But what happens is I cannot preach enough. Once you knock those bushings out of there and everything else, spend good time into cleaning the eye or wherever you're going to put the bushings, because so many guys try to force them in and hammer their brains out, and they peen over the end of the bushings, and all day long I'll do them and I'll prove to people like all you had to do was watch me. I spend a lot of time cleaning those holes, and I'll walk those bushings right in. And not to mention too, don't forget, you want to make sure that your little holes in the bushings are lined up to do the greasing and so on. You know, 1 second here. As a perfect example, if you saw that side thing with all the pictures of the components and everything, this is where a good manufacturer does come hand in hand. Dorman, I believe, bought out Dayton. Now, some of the pictures I got on the side over there, and I cannot believe how many different models, makes, trailers, trucks, tractors, different systems. I'll give you an idea what's out there. This is just a short little book over here. This gets me in very, very fast. It's got some dimensions of bushings, but the actual book, and I don't print it out. The reason I don't print it out, it's over 1,000 pages. So I downloaded it. So every time I need something, doesn't matter if it's for Hendrickson, doesn't matter whose suspension, whose spring, whose whatever, I just go over there, click the button, find the right page, which of course this little thing I did print out helps it get there very, very fast. All right? And I'll have a breakdown of anything, any type of a component or part that vehicle will have, you know, and of course they'll list it out. It's for 2000 this, 2020 this, and so on and so on. So I just wanted to point that out, you know. You can learn a lot from parts books. I mean, anytime I do anything, they're one of the first places I go into, you know. Now, here's a progressive very rate spring. They're leaf type spring assemblies, variable deflection. Okay, they use a cam type of a bracket. So as the spring deflects, and you can see it over here, you know, it gives you an opportunity for it to kind of like free float and move, okay, at that point of contact, okay? And basically at that point on that bracket, it moves towards the center of the spring assembly, and it basically shortens it. So you can visualize, as weight goes on, you hit a bump, you're gonna have some movement there, but however, in this case, it's meant to move freely up and down like that, okay? Not all springs sit on top of an axle all day long. Eh? Every once in a while, they'll wind up being on the bottom. Eh? So be aware of it. There's a lot of reasons for it. You know, I believe this was out of a dolly. A lot has to do with center of gravity, you know, and so on and so on. You know. Then the question often comes, especially when we get into regulatory areas. So when a vehicle gets pulled over on the side of the road, you know, there are regulations to it. You know, just because a helper leaf is broken doesn't necessarily put you out of service. Okay, and this is why I'm very, very busy with a lot of the trainings, because a lot of companies fear that getting pulled over the side of the road, they fear getting the violations, which affects the CSA scores, and so on and so on. You know, so this is a perfect example. You know, if you do get pulled over, keep in mind, okay, for violation, you know, has to be a main leaf and so on. But however, the question is, what is a main leaf? And that's why I put that in there, so everybody has a clear understanding. And that's the importance of doing training and get everybody on the same page, you know. There are torque leaves in there. Torque leaves wind up being very, very important also. Okay? You have them, and they're meant to eliminate a lot of the axle wind up. Okay, basically prevents the axial rotation of the axle under very aggressive braking acceleration, and it does help with the dampening of the oscillations. So they are very, 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 very important, you know, and they are an inspectable item too. But we've talked about the springs and leaves and so on. Something's got to hold this stuff together, okay? And one of the nice things, you know, just so you know, I like to get into publications, and I mean, I don't know everything, but man, I'm hungry for information. So if you ever saw my office, somebody made a comment of, I got walls of books and all sorts of stuff in there. But I thought this was rather nice. Dayton, they have what they call a Tech Essentials. So some of the script that you see here, I borrowed it, you know, and I borrowed the picture from them, okay? And as you can see, the U-bolt provides the force required to clamp the leaf spring related components firmly together. Okay? I cannot, again, that U-bolt, if you ever wonder why springs break in the center over there, you can bet your dollar to donuts it's gonna be because the U-bolts were loose, somebody didn't torque them correctly, and so on and so on. For my money, you take your time and you really torque them. Okay? You can't do a willy-nilly job with these U-bolts. They are very, very crucial in the scheme of things. So by clamping the spring to the axle seat, horizontal forces acting on center pole, they're greatly reduced. We already discussed the center port over here. Okay? So, which in turn reduce shearing of the center bolt. So, but anyway, the screen changed a little, so I got distracted a little bit. Finally, proper clamping of spring by U-bolts provide the desired spring stiffness. So there's a lot of things you have to take in consideration, okay? Again, you know, I discussed vehicle ride height. No, I didn't yet, but the ride itself is important and so on, characteristics, you know. So you got to maintain those characteristics. Again, some engineer designed it in there for every specific vehicle, and so it's important. Our job is to maintain all that, okay? Very important, again, virtually all leaf spring failures through the center hole are caused by, again, I mentioned it, inadequate U-bolt clamping. So look for signs of movement within the area. That's our job, okay? Worn polished surfaces, axle seats, top plates, they definitely are indicators of unwanted movement, you know? So our job is to replace any damaged components. Okay? I threw that in again. If I, you know, I do a lot of regulation. I got regulation classes I do all over the place. They're up to 4, 5, 6 hour ones. I have them specific for a company, whether it be drivers, safety people, whatever, and I have them specific for maintenance people. So I plucked that out. And again, regulatory wise, your vehicle gets pulled over. I mean, basically in 393, 207. Axle position parts broken, missing, and resulting axle shift. This is bad, guys, because I can't believe a driver couldn't feel that, because I'm going to tell you right now, when that driver is turning that wheel, you can't tell me that didn't feel that axle wanting to move. But anyway, you got to look at that kind of stuff. Put the whole picture again. U-bolts, okay? Your most basic U-bolts that you're going to wind up getting is the round bend ones over there, the semi-round bend and square bends. And you will run across the forged top semi-round type, okay? Now, let me get back. I want to do something. So I'm not quite sure who's watching. I should have said in the beginning, a lot of us in our fleets, we don't necessarily do springs jobs all day long, every single day. However, if you're a company that all you do is your sign says springs, okay? Your company is in a whole different league. You're gonna have all the springs available to you You will go over there, you will add leaves. If somebody complains, I got a sagging vehicle, sure, I'll re-get them back up, I'll add an extra leaf, and they'll do everything. And sometimes you might run across a vehicle that, and this is, I'm relating to U-bolts, you might run across a vehicle that all of a sudden it's like, nobody's got the U-bolt. You're doing it now. What the hell am I going to do? Most of these good spring places, they will have, and what they'll, you can stay there, okay? They'll have, she's trying to follow me. It's my granddaughter doing this. They'll have you can see the threaded ends here. They'll have the rods over here, and they'll put it in the machine. Let me back up a little. I want to see that everybody can see that it bends, okay? So what happens is, you put them in a machine, okay, and I'm going to try to do this, and they'll come up and they'll bend it into a perfect U, if you see over there, and of course, they'll maintain it. Okay? So you basically, Jesus Christ, it's hard. You basically want a dimensions and stuff like that, which is, I got to put this down, but basically, it's easier to hold it in my hand like this. But basically what happens is you need to know your dimensions from here to here, because if you get it too long, then you're going to get a situation as this goes up, then you got to chop this off and everything. It looks really gnarly. But again, U-bolts aren't necessarily a huge issue, but make sure. The big thing is that I'm going to show in the next slide, I believe, coming up, that no matter where you get what you get for U-bolts, okay, do not reuse U-bolts. Used U-bolts will have rusted and damaged threads from the previous installation. Previously, and they've already torqued once, the U-bolt will suffer some distorted threads from the engagement deep nut. Deep nuts should be tightened once and retorqued. Never loosen and retighten. And I know you might get in an emergency situation to cover thigh butt whenever possible. You know what? You're going through all that effort. Get a new U-bolt, okay? And again, another reason is they suffer fatigue and so on. Okay? Importance of it, and this is why you're trying to do and use new U-bolts. You're trying to achieve proper clamping force, okay? And you're going to have a hard time doing it with reused U-bolts. Just to give you an idea, okay? Then you have it in your handout here, okay? But you always go to your OEM or your manufacturer spec. You can use this as a good guideline, 5/8, 170, 3/4, 300, inch and an eighth, 1,300 pounds of torque, okay? And these are suggested torque for grade 8 U-bolts. Okay? But I will venture to say most of the vehicles today, you're going to wind up having some form of an airbag spring suspension, okay? This today is a very popular suspension system used by heavy-duty trucks and trailers. Provides the ultimate smooth shock and vibration. Let's keep that driver happy. We have a hard time trying to keep drivers. The happier you keep them, the better off we're going to be, okay? And the nice thing about this air spring suspensions, they adjust to load conditions automatically. You don't have to do anything. And this allows a low rate suspension with a light or no load and high rate suspension with heavier loads. So to accomplish this, you're going to use a leveling valve, call it a height control valve, whatever. And it's utilized to automatically provide and maintain vehicle ride height. This valve is sensitive to frame height. Okay, and this is the key with leveling valves. The height, the height, the height, the height. And it will provide automatic filling or exhausting of a spring bag. They're not really that complicated to maintain vehicle level, because that's what you're trying to do. Lever arm on the valve has a neutral position that serves to automatically return the valve to a closed position. And I'll cover that a little bit. Now, I'm going to show you a little bit of a case study, because up to this point, okay, we assume that whether you got an air spring suspension, whether you got spring suspension, you know, it's kind of one of those non-exotic areas. But that's not necessarily the case. I'll be very honest with you. If you look on some of these trailers, these air spring systems, you got pilot valves, you got pump valves, you got all sorts of stuff on those air systems, okay? So just to prove my point here, okay, that today's suspensions get integrated into so many other areas. This is a perfect example. I'm going to switch back to my slide here, okay? Complaint was ABS light would come on occasion. Codes were not typical ABS codes. I'm not going to spend too much time. I didn't build it out as a, 15-minute and get into the systems and stuff, okay? But it happened to be a stability type of codes. But I just want you to be aware of this kind of stuff, okay? Occasionally on this particular vehicle, it was a trailer, the ABS light comes on. But when you question that driver, that person that drives it, or that owner, whatever, and we did, the answer is, basically when does it come on? Usually when it's empty, and right away, God gave you the best tool that you ever had, and that's your brain. And again, looked underneath it, it's another roll support system. So where do you start? And if you have, and you can't, see it too well, but if you have the software, I got the Meritor WAPCO software over here, okay? My toolbox, I get in there, and it's right here. There's a little box in there, okay? It actually has readings for suspension pressure and service brake pressure application, okay? And again, like I said, the reason we hit that direction, because the driver said it was empty. No, I'm going to skip this because you won't hear it too well. It's a video and it basically explained everything I said, because I'm also watching a clock here. But what we did was we checked and verified the leveling valves were working, and bags were getting right pressure. So the bags were getting the right pressure. Also, the big thing was air getting to the module, and we checked that, it was getting. Now, what we did is the module doing anything with it? So we used a blowgun, okay, just took the fitting out, and we monitored our scan tool, okay. We monitored the TADA, and guess what? There were no changes. The fix, unfortunately, was replacing this very expensive unit, okay. You got it on your handouts, the leveling valve, module assembly, airbags, and so on. So again, are we tying a suspension in today with other areas? Absolutely. So it's more important today than ever you have a clear understanding of how suspension systems work and what their integration or marriage, look at it whatever you want, is with the whole picture of the vehicle. Okay? Now, I'm not going to spend much time. I can go through 10,000 different type of suspensions. This is a rubber block style. We call it an equalizer beam suspension. Typically, you'll use it in very heavy application type of trucks, and typically they'll use rubber and all sorts of stuff, to cushion it. But it's that beam on the bottom, okay? That beam on the bottom is so important, okay? And that's what that's why they call it equalizing beams. They equalize the loads from axle to axle. And the reason they're on the bottom is it has to do with the center of gravity. I'm not quite sure how many people get into that kind of stuff. But again, they're kind of, you see them out there, okay? And on that beam, you'll see right here, okay, they flex, they pivot, okay, and again, why? You're trying to balance the forces they get subjected to while they're going over all sorts of different highway conditions, and basically you're trying to keep the tire to road contact. And there are two types. You have what you see over here, solid rubber or rubber cushion type. And of course, you have a leaf spring type also, okay? And I mentioned those trying to lower the center of gravity of the axle load, and that's why you see those usually typically placed underneath. Let's move on here, okay. Suspension equalizer pins. I threw this slide here, guys, because if you ever work on this stuff, you are busting your whatever off. This can be work. You can get tools, they'll knock them out. But I'm going to tell you, this is one time, and I'll be honest with you, in my shop, we don't work on, we replace springs, but when it comes to the beams, I usually, you know what, I'm going to take that beam off. I got a spring shop that specializes in this stuff. They got all the, like, knock the bushings out and everything. I'll just put that into our service van, take it over there. Hey guys, rebush it, call me when it's ready, okay? And again, it's a perfect example of, you still, to be honest with you, I'm talking about the end bushing, you still have to get the beam out. So that picture you see over here, and I'll try to put a little, this part's over here, you're still gonna play games trying to get these end cups out and get that bushing out. And we're back to the same thing. Once you get them out, man, clean that center up and go for it, you know. Now, I don't know how many people watching here have ever had to work on these Mac Camelbacks. Remember that torque spec I gave you? And that arrow's pointing to torque multiplier. Once in a while, I'll get a fleet that will have a Mac. They'll have the Camel hump spring. And they'll call me up, we pulled the spring out, didn't realize that the torque is going to be well over 1,000 pounds. Our torque wrenches don't even come close. You know, yeah, come on over for our torque multiplier. Okay, so if you don't have the right tools, don't do it. The other thing is you need to know how to support this system if you work on these camel humps. And the reason I'm telling you, I learned the hard way. Years ago, I had my brother work with me when we first started. So we jacked up this tractor, you know, went to do it. And my brother was actually doing the work and stuff. So I happened to just walk by, and I'm hearing a creak, and I'm looking down, and that frame was ready to pop off of there, come off the jack stands, and my brother was underneath it. I never moved so fast in my freaking life. I grabbed him by the hair and yanked him right out from under there, and thank God, because that frame did come off the jacks and everything came down. And I don't know about you guys, I would be an unhappy camper if that frame came up on top of me, because believe me, I'm not strong enough to pull up a frame real fast, you know, lift a truck. Now, shock absorbers. A hydraulic shock absorber is designed, used to dampen oscillations from road variation and shock. Piston and rod is enclosed inside a cylinder filled with oil. Typically, the shell is mounted on the axle while the piston rod assembly mounts to the frame. Piston contains valve metering orifice designed to allow oil to flow more easily. You know, I'll just real fast switch again. Okay, over here, if you can hone in over here. Okay. Very good. But I took this apart, and these are valves. So for a very quick explanation, you can back out. For a very quick explanation, when this thing goes up and down, okay, you're going to have a restriction. So keep that restriction in mind. And the reason we have it is, of course, we're trying to dampen the oscillations. And I'll get back to that restriction thing in a second. But I wanted to show you that you do have valving in there, and a valve do act like a restriction. So I'll put two and together in a second here. Back to this, okay, this allows the shock absorber to compress more easy than it will extend. This rate is ideal for absorbing bumps in the road, controlling rebound rate of the unsprung weight, and so on and so on. Now, some of the following is again from Dayton, from Dorman Suspension Tech. I'm hesitating, but, you know, again, do yourselves a favor, you know, that company there. If you want to get more information, just go online. I believe you can set yourself with a login number and everything, and you'd be surprised how much stuff they have on there. And I mentioned the big event in the beginning. If you go on their line, on their Dorman training, it's like it's well worth your time to go on there, and you'll see, you know, G and all his automotive guys, and you have access for so much stuff in there. But let's get back to this. With the shock absorber, it is a relationship, okay? They do play a crucial role, especially in vehicles equipped with air spring bags. They're very important. Shock absorbers are used to dampen the shocks. I know I've repeated that a few times, okay? But another way to look at it, the shock serves to return the spring to its installed height quickly and keep the tire in contact with the road. Otherwise, each impact would cause a series of oscillations. And again, we talked about that could occur if the spring existed unchecked, okay? So the whole goal of all the suspensions and the shock absorber is really, think about it, to keep contact between the tire and road, okay? And I don't have the time to do this in my brake classes. When I go through the ABS portion of it, I'll be very honest with you, I talk a little bit about the tire to road contact and how it affects ABS and so on. So here's another example of ABS working together with suspension. Regardless, shock failure is sometimes hard to diagnose when it isn't broken or leaking. Heat test can be one way to determine it, okay? So you can read this thing. I'm going to go back again. Okay? Now, with shock absorbers, when I'm doing classes, live classes, I'll ask the guys, how do you check a shock absorber on a car? And everybody will come up and they'll tell me, it's like I do the jounce test. I go like this with a car, okay? And if it jounces back, chances are pretty good I got a bad shock. Well, I'm going to tell you, all day long, you try to do that with a truck, you know, it's probably going to take about 20 of us on the running board and jumping up and down to, you know, hey, take a look, is it jouncing or whatever the case may be. It ain't going to happen. But these shocks do fail. Obviously, if you got an oil coming out of it, that's a good sign of failure. So what I've done for a long time is I tell them, use a temp probe, okay? So basically, if you got an ambient air is 70 degrees, you shoot each one of the shocks, drive the vehicle, rough road, lightly touch the shock. That's one way. I mean, if you trust your senses, go for it, okay? Because the warm shock absorber indicates it is working. And the reason being, again, is, remember those little valves under here? And I said you're going to have a restriction. So whenever you move oil, anything, if it has to go through a restriction, what are you going to generate? Absolutely, you're going to generate heat, temperature. And that's what we're looking to sense. So basically, you take your temp probe, you know. So if you started at say 67, you go by each one of the shocks. And in the real world, you are not going to see a huge change, okay? But if you do see a 5-10 degree change, that shock is working. However, when you get to that one shock, you started out round number 70 degrees. You go 15-minute drive, it's still 70 degrees. You just identified that bad shock. Okay? And they do fail all day long. Now, there's some regulatory reminders. Leaf springs must not be cracked or broken. Coil springs must not be cracked or broken. I wanted to throw that in there. You know, I'm not going to spend much time, but don't forget, we are a highly regulatory industry, you know. So those are the things. Axial shifting, remember I discussed that. Why does this happen? This is a front spring pin on a steer axle. You got only about 10% or less left. If that ever snaps and that driver's going down the road and makes a turn and that snaps, he might just lock up your drag link or something and lock it up the wheel to a frame and might not be able to return. However, I usually do a huge big thing with it when I do a live audience, but I'll tell you right now, one of the biggest reasons, oh, this isn't taking grease. You try replace the circuit fitting, it ain't working, time marches on. You know what? I'll catch you the next time. I'll catch it the next time. I'll catch it the next time. So when is the next time when that spring actually breaks? You know, so again, maintenance is important. What type of vehicle? This was a dump truck, real fast, because now I'm really looking at the clock. Okay, and this was on a road. I spent a lot of time on the roadside with enforcement guys. I get a lot of pictures from there, and the officer went to look for vehicles that are kind of like, you know, suspicious, meaning that, oh geez, this might be a good candidate. I think there's something wrong. Well, you couldn't miss this guy. This vehicle was dog tracking, you know, taking up 2 lanes. But my question is, why would you even be on a highway when you're taking up 1.5 lanes? So again, those are the things that you see up there, you know. Here's another example. It's like, really? I'm not going to get into pre-trips and stuff like that, but it's like, wow, that's sad, you know. And that's why we have a lot of stuff out there, okay. And here's a radius rod, okay, in the springs. They have, you know, they're important. They perform a very big function, okay, and I'll get into it a little bit. In your handout you have, and I'm not going to spend time, but if you're interested in regulatory stuff, those have it in there, steerable, lift axle, and so on and so on. This slide here, preventable, how many people in that organization didn't understand the responsibilities, you know, and this is why a good maintenance program is so huge, you know, and this basically is how good is your visual inspection skills, because it is a skill set and you need to hone it, okay. You should catch them in sorts instead of other composite springs. I don't know if anybody ever remembers, speaking of composite springs, the composite spring that was not made out of steel. Okay, they tried it for a couple years. I believe one of the cars had it too. It never worked out, but you know, they have tried everything in vehicles out there, just so you know, out of service areas. So again, those are all yours. Now, another case study. This particular owner bought a used vehicle from out of state. So they came into this state, brought it here. He's originally from this state, so he needed an annual inspection. You know, we're a registered-based state, you know. So at first glance, didn't even have to go underneath or anything. Boy, this is going to be an issue here. I wonder what's going on. So we looked at the bag, and of course that indicated an overfill, you know. So right away, is it a leveling valve issue? Okay, and I'll tell you right now, the leveling valves aren't usually the issue. They're usually pretty robust, okay, but sometimes the issue is basically us guys. You know, we're not that comfortable with doing leveling valves, okay. So, for example, when it was all said and done, didn't have the right height, and if you look at those frame brackets, you know, springs, the brackets, spring brackets right there in the frame, they are totally worn in. Our name's not going on it, okay? So, this guy went back to, Jesus, I just bought this truck from you guys, what are you going to do? Well, no, you bought it, it's out of state. So I told him, you know what, you need to file a complaint, and you know, I'll document everything just to show that they should not have sold that truck that way, because they said it passed all DOT inspections and everything, you know. Same vehicle, look at the torque arm over there. Now a lot of the systems have torque arms. The torque arm's kind of important, okay. They're also utilized to do alignments. You can put shin packs, but you also have this type of a torque arm over here. We call it a transverse torque rod, is a better word for it, and it connects the center of each axle banjo housing to a frame cross member of the truck, and that again permits higher driveline torque forces, additional stability, especially in rough terrain. And again, you can see over there, look how that not being adjusted correctly, that U-joint was ready to pop, okay? So the height control valve, they're used to automatically add and exhaust air, and really that's what does that automatic of suspension for load, empty, and all that so on. These leveling valves, you know, I call them leveling valves. I've been doing it all my life. You might call it a height control valve, HCV. Doesn't really matter. It's the same thing. And the linkages are designed to maintain the vehicle right height. And I really emphasize the height, because that is the key to this. You know, the right height as loads increase and decrease, and the loads can increase and decrease, but you need to maintain the absolute right height that the OEM says it should have. So in this particular case with leveling valves, the correct installation is crucial to maintaining suspension vehicle performance. And that's why the OEM specifications must be followed when installing an air control system. Okay, you have to follow their RTFI, read the freaking instruction for valve locations and right height. Okay, and I tell you, first indicator that you have something wrong with the right height, some people will say the pressure and everything else is really it's right height. And drivers will complain about the right performance, which relates to this right height when someone replaces a leveling valve. And usually it's I just had the leveling valve replaced, and ever since then I'm having some issues. You know, it's not, doesn't feel the way it should. How do they work? It is a valve that has a lever rigidly connected to the axle assembly, usually the rear axle, and usually it's by means of linkage. It could be flat or rod. There's so many different types out there, okay? But there's so many commonalities. It is used to control air into and out of the air springs. Just think about it, okay? What are you trying to do? You are trying to either put air in there or let air out if you have too much in there, okay? However, so you have three stages, and I'll get to the neutral stage, okay? So when the axle moves upward, relation to chassis as when driving over a road bump, the lever is forced upward. The reverse happens when the axle goes into a pothole. So moving the lever charges and discharges air to the air spring. Most of them will have a delay mechanism built into them to prevent rapid cycling. Typically, the valve has a neutral position, indicating air suspension is properly inflated to the proper vehicle level. Basically, no air passes through the valve is what happens. You know, you're not letting any out, nothing's going in. Here's some pictures of it. So when the lever is moved off this neutral position, the valve meters or exhausts air from the air spring, depending on whether the lever is moved up or down. So when the vehicle is driven under normal road conditions, hydraulic delay feature dampens the random inputs. So there's the reason for your delay feature, okay? To keep from the rapid cycling between the opening and closing events. So let's use a real example here. Now you're applying a load to the chassis. Basically, you're coupling a tractor to the trailer. So the trailer gets coupled to the tractor and the load's going to change. The frame of the tractor lowers in relationship to the axle. The leveling valve moves to open the valve, metering air to the air springs. Air passes through the valve from the supply to charge the air springs, air bags if you're comfortable with it, and inflates them to raise the frame to resume what we call its set right height. That's your neutralizing position of the valve. However, when uncoupling, now you're getting rid of your trailer, the frame, the tractor, of course, rises in relation to the axle. This moves the control lever to an angle, causing a valve to exhaust air until the frame resumes its set right height again. Set right height again. That is the key to it, okay? Most air pressure suspension trucks and trailers use a pressure regulator in the air circuit to regulate suspension air to lower values. So you have another valve in there, okay? 90 psi seems to be typical, and the reason they use that, supposing you have a kind of an air loss on the airbag that still holds on the primary air for your brakes, okay? So you have a pressure protection valve for that reason, okay? So you got a pressure regulator, pressure protection, exactly what that valve says. Of what I described over here, you have a loss, but however, you will have air for braking, okay? The problem with these suspensions we have today, okay, they can be more complicated than meets the eye. I already mentioned at the beginning, you can have piloted valves, brake isolation valves, all sorts of stuff, dump valves and everything else. So they can get quite frustrated. Here, I'm going to skip this slide. You have it in your handouts. I got some kind of like look at this, look at that, because I want to get to this real fast. Okay, these are swing arms. Okay, it's one of the least desired jobs out there. Okay, that's why we are special, guys. We're willing to do those kind of, what the hell's wrong with us? We take on anything that's shown at us, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So real fast, when you get into this, you need to get a toolkit that I have highlighted in here. It is a lot of work. Don't attempt it unless you have the right tools. RTFI, aligning the new bushing, clocking it is crucial. Torquing is very important. Watch your alignment, okay? And there's a lot of information out there. Here is before, and you will work when you work on these suspensions. And of course, here we are, real nice, you know, afterwards. You know, I just want to see what, you know, and again, there's example on your right over here. This is a toolkit that you would need, you know, so using right parts is critical, you know, again, this is the real world, what you're going to get into. Suspensions, no matter how you look at it, it's still a suspension issue. Okay? And I put my little thing, of course, it falls under stupidity. Suspensions, this is like, again, on the roadside, you know, and everyone we talked about, you know, and this slide here basically is about, you know, if you do inspections, that's what you should need or should do. Questions, I'm going to back up real fast, okay? I'm just going to hold this leveling valve in my hand. I can't, again, one of the problems we have, oops, let me get my thing back. One of the problems, again, I know I'm talking about leveling valves a lot, but we get vehicles coming in, that's good enough. We get vehicles coming in constantly. You know, I have my right isn't right, my right isn't. Keep it simple. When this gets hooked on, you can back up just a little. When this gets hooked up to your axle here, you have a rod, okay? And I'll just hold it up real fast. You have a rod like this, okay? All you're doing is keep it in mind. Go someplace, figure out what the right height is, and depending on the OEM, it's usually from the top of the axle to the frame someplace. That's the most crucial thing. So what you basically do is, you know what? You take this valve here, you give it air, say it was empty, and you raise it up, and with your tape measure, all you're trying to do is just whoop. At this point, that's the height they want. Go like this, okay? And usually you can lock it in with a pin or something. Now you adjust your rod to it. That's as stupidly simple as you want it. And of course, if you want to test it, you can take that rod off. Am I putting air in? Am I taking air out? No, it's not working. I have a leak. Then of course you get rid of it. So we've come to the end of this thing here. And, you know, I'll be very honest with you. We could have made this into a series, part 1 and part 2. I went through a lot, but hopefully you walked away realizing that, you know, there's a lot more to a suspension than what we typically have thought about for years. Hey, it's a bunch of springs and so on. I'm going to real fast, and I'll get to you guys in a second. My next slide is questions, okay? So if you have any questions, I'm watching the chat box, okay? So after that slide is, if you take a chance, okay, snag, okay, with your phone or whatever, snag these or scan these QR codes, and if you get a chance, you know, kind of fill out a survey, say, hey, we like this, this works, keep it going or whatever. So you have a couple of 3 different things. You have it on your handout. You know, either way, go on the Dorman Training Center site, and you'll see a lot of this stuff recorded over there. The other thing, and I didn't have it in this month, is like, we are really, I get a little kind of, I'm not jealous, but when I look out there, you know, there's, oh my gosh, there's so many trainings available for the automotive. And my friend G, who actually runs all this Dorman training, he's all over the country, and his 3 other automotive guys. But please get it. You know what? If you guys are interested in anything in heavy duty, we'll tailor it. I love tailoring courses on anything. And actually, I'm going to go into, I can't remember where, she might remember, August or someplace. O'Reilly's is getting interested in heavy duty, so I'll be doing a 4-hour heavy duty brake class. But my point being is, we can go over, and oh, the one thing that I forgot. She was up in Utah doing an AC class for automotive, and she and I got our heads together. We did a couple of AC heavy duty classes last year, and we thought it was, oh man, this is so late into the summer, it might not fly. And we were so totally pleasantly surprised. We did it over here in my classroom. We did a couple classes, and I mean, we filled them. We had guys coming from different parts of the country to it, you know. So we are definitely open for starting to do AC classes. Hopefully this time, if we can put it out earlier, we'll get it done before the AC kind of rush crowd comes in. My AC isn't working, but you know, knowing that you need AC no matter what, you know, if you got a defroster, it needs to work all the time. So given with that, I'm gonna knock this off. I'll just watch the chat box just for a few minutes to see if anybody's got any comments or anything else. And again, I can't speak highly enough of all you guys that come and watch this. I'm always totally pleasantly surprised, you know, especially me being a little guy like me. I'm not into you know, the ATA, TMC and all that stuff. With just a little guy like me, just, you know, trying to do the best I can. So again, thank you guys. You know, I appreciate that. I need to.
Let's thank you, Swede.
Oh no,
You're
no.
not a little guy, you're a big guy.
Big guy.
In the industry of heavy duty.
Yeah. But again.
I think Swede did a good job.
Yeah. So camera, somebody even said camera operator, great job. Elena, that's my granddaughter. Wow, excellent. Thank you so much, guys. You know, okay. So yeah, absolutely. Don't forget the big event. Please go on Dorman. Support all our trainings. Again, I wish I was good as the automotive guys that Dorman has, but you guys will enjoy it, you know. So thank you again. So